Good morning and welcome to Friends Praise Sabbath School. We're so glad you can join us for worship this morning. As you watch today, be sure to look for our brand new Adventist Pioneer stories. And let's go out in nature with Alex this week. Now let's get started singing. It's time for Sabbath School to begin.
Have you heard the song, Who's the King of the Jungle? Well, if you have, I invite you to sing along and do the motions with us.
Who's the king of the jungle? Who's the king of the sea? Wada, wada, wada. Who's the king of the universe? The jungle and the sea. Let me tell you, it's J-E-S-U-S. Yes,
boys and girls. It is now time to sing the books of the Bible. So I found this chart and I thought we could ask ourselves a couple questions. So the first one on here, it says, what is the first sentence in the Bible? Well, the first sentence in the Bible is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and that is found in Genesis 1, verses 1. So now we're going to sing the Old Testament, but do you guys remember how many books are in the Old Testament? The answer is 39. So now let's sing.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st Kings, 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and the last one, Malachi.
So, also, do you guys know how many books are in the New Testament? There's a total of 27 books. Now here's a trick one. In the New Testament, what is the last word in the whole Bible? You guys know? That word is amen. Okay, so now you're going to sing the New Testament.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, and the letter to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon, Hebrews, and the book of James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation.
It is also time for offerings. Did you guys bring your offerings with you today? Well, we still need to give our offerings even if we are stuck at home. So go to AdventistGiving.org or mail it to your local church. Thank you for giving your offerings.
Thank you, Jesus, for this day, and pray for all the workers and all that who've been working in the hospital and all that. Pray for all these church families who've been surviving. Pray for this lifting up soon. Amen.
Happy Sabbath! I'm so glad to see you again and to tell you a story about a little girl who loved Jesus and whose mommy and daddy and grandma loved Jesus very much. Justina lived in a place called Moldova. It was a part of the Soviet Union. And so today I have a little something special that was made in the Soviet Union to show you after our story. Maybe Justina's grandma even made these because many grandmas did. Justina didn't remember ever seeing her mommy and daddy. When she was only 2 years old, they felt called by Jesus to go to Ireland to teach people about Jesus. In Ireland, there were not very many people who knew about Jesus and that he was coming in the clouds. And Justina's mommy and daddy wanted them to know that. And so they went. They promised that they would come back and get Justina and left her with Grandma. They knew Grandma would take good care of her and that she would be happy with Grandma. And away they went. They said they'd get a house, and when they got a house, they would come back for her, and she would come to Ireland and live with them. A long time passed. Grandma did take good care of her, and at first she asked, "Grandma, are Mommy and Daddy coming today?" "Not today," Grandma would say, "but we'll have a happy day." A few days would pass, and she would say, "Grandma, are they coming today?" And Grandma would say, "Not yet, not today." So many days passed. After a while, Justina didn't think about them coming every day anymore because they hadn't come and so much time had passed. She was 2 years old, Then she was 3 years old. Then she was 4 years old. And 5, and they still hadn't come for her. She knew what they would look like, even though she didn't remember them, because Mama wrote her letters, told her all about the house that they had gotten. And they made her videos, and she saw them, and Mama and Daddy talked to her and told her that they loved her, just like I'm talking to you. You can't see me, and you're not close to me, but you hear my voice, and you see me, and you know it's me. So she knew it was her Mommy and Daddy. They still didn't come. They were gone so long that one day Mommy told her, "You're going to have a little baby brother or sister." Wow, that was so exciting. And then she did have a little baby sister, but she didn't see her. She just heard Mommy and Daddy talking about her and showing her pictures and sending Grandma pictures. Grandma was excited for the baby. So much time. So much time. Grandma tried to make it nice for her. She planted a garden every year. She showed her the little seeds and how they grew into the green plants and how they grew into beautiful lettuce and beautiful tomatoes and corn, sweet corn that was so good when Grandma cooked it. She grew beautiful flowers in her yard. She showed Justina all the rose buds, and then when the beautiful roses bloomed out, she let Justina pick them and smell them. They were so beautiful. She made tapes with Justina to send to Justina's Mommy and Daddy, and she encouraged her to tell Mommy and Daddy all the things that they were doing, because they missed their little girl too. So much time passed. One day Justina said, "Are Mommy and Daddy coming? Are they ever coming for me?" Oh, that made Grandma feel so sad. Because, even it makes this Grandma feel sad that my grandchild would think that. So sad Grandma felt, and she said, "Oh, yes." And she must have given Justina a great big hug. "Oh, yes, Justina, they're going to come for you. They're working for Jesus. They love you, and they're coming for you." And one day, Justina said, "Do you think it will be today, Grandma?" And Grandma said, "I do. I think it will be today." Justina could hardly believe it. And then a little later in the day, Grandma said, "Oh, Justina, Justina dear, come here." Justina came running, and she said, "Justina, look out the window." "What's out the window, Grandma?" "Run quickly and look out the window." And so Justina went over and lifted the curtain back and looked out the window, and there was a lady and a man and a little girl standing out there on the sidewalk. Justina looked again, and she went, "Oh, it's Mommy and Daddy! It's Mommy and Daddy! They came! She swung open the door and ran down the sidewalk and said, "Mommy, Daddy, Mommy, Daddy." And of course you know this part of the story. They grabbed her up and gave her lots and lots of hugs and kisses. And she looked at that little girl standing there, and they said, "This is your little sister. This is your little sister. And you're going to go with us to Ireland and live with us there." And there at the gate she met Jennifer. Jennifer was already 3 years old. She could walk all by herself and everything before Justina saw her. Oh my, it was so exciting. Grandma didn't want them to go right away. She had missed them too. So after a few weeks visiting with Grandma and packing all of Justina's things up, they took her back to Ireland, where they could continue working and teaching people about Jesus. You know, in Ireland, there are still so few churches. If you ask Mrs. Canada, she probably has more than 12 Seventh-day Adventist churches close to her house where she could choose to go on Sabbath morning. I only have one Seventh-day Adventist church close to my house. It's over 60 miles from my house to another Seventh-day Adventist church for me to go to. But in the Irish mission, in the whole Irish mission of Ireland, there are only 855 Seventh-day Adventists, and there are only 12 churches. 12 churches! My, that's not very many. So, Mommy and Daddy wanted to work for Jesus there for as long as they could. As Justina got older, she thought about how she wanted her Mommy and Daddy to come back to Grandma's house. She wanted them to be with her. And she thought, that's how it is for heaven. We talk all the time about the fact that Jesus is going to come in the clouds. And we want Jesus to come in the clouds. When my children were little, we sang a song about playing with a real little bear and having a great big picnic in heaven with all of our friends and our grandmas and our great-great-grandmas that we have never met who love Jesus. And we talked all the time about Jesus coming. We still do. It seems like it's never going to happen sometimes. We grow older and he still hasn't come. But one day, boys and girls, he will come.
So what do you think of when you think of a river? Maybe you think of a long one, a short one, something that is wide or narrow. Well, most rivers have one thing in common. They are fresh water and they flow into a saltwater base. So that means that they are fresh water as they come down, but at the ending, they flow mostly into salt water. So rivers begin mostly at a high point called a source. The definition of a source is a riverhead which a stream or river flows out of. Most sources are from the mountains or someplace really up high. So in mountains, when the snow melts and it creates that little trickle of water that you see, it's called a rill. And the rill as it goes down the mountain, picking up more water as it goes and getting bigger, it will start to become a stream. And so one example of this is the Rhone River. It's found in West Europe, and this river flows from a mountaintop into the Mediterranean Sea. John 7:38 says, "Whoever believes in me, as the scriptures has said, out of his heart will flow springs of living water." Now, does this mean that we're actually going to have springs of living water flowing out of our hearts when Jesus comes in? Of course not. Romans 5:13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." When we have the joy of Jesus in our hearts, we'll be able to share him with our friends and our neighbors and everyone in the world. And when he's been shared to all of the world, then the end will come, and Jesus will come and take us home. I can't wait for that day. Can you?
Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Wolf again, and I'm so glad to be in the kitchen with you cooking today. Now, we're going to make a fun recipe again. We like to make cooking fun. This recipe is very similar to something you may eat at home, but it's got a different name. And when we used this the first time, we did it on a Friday night. We have Vespers together a lot as a family, and one of the fun things we like to do is get together about an hour before the sun goes down and have a special supper. And a lot of times we'll try things we've never tried before, and this was one of them. These are not nachos, they are called tachos. And they're lots of fun for kids because you get to put anything on it you want. You know, sometimes you don't like to eat the things that you're served with. This time you get to pick and choose. So I'm going to show you what we make our tachos with. Instead of taco chips, we use tater tots. So tachos instead of nachos. Now I'm going to try not to say nachos when I mean tachos. I'm working really hard at it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to our oven, which I've already done, and preheat your oven to 450 degrees. All these directions are right on the back of your bag of tachos. So it'll be preheating while you're doing this easy step. You're going to need a baking pan. I'm sure your mom's got one. And then I like to take a piece of foil and cover my baking pan with that because that makes it real easy cleanup. And a lot of times your kids are the ones that have to do the dishes, and you know when cheese melts on a baking pan or in a frying pan or a plate, sometimes can be hard to get off. So this will make it nice and easy cleanup for you guys. All right, from there, easy peasy, pour your tater tots on it. And you can use the whole bag, part of the bag. How many people you're serving, it depends on how many tachos you need to make. So I have poured them on my pan, kind of spread them out a little bit. I want them all to fall off if I tilt this too far. Then what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to bake them. And I'm baking them just like it says on the bag. I think really in my oven, I had to go the whole 25 minutes so that they're nice and crisp because you don't want them smushy. You want them warm all the way through and crispy. So I'm going to put these in the oven. You may not see me for just a second. So I'm going to pull mine out of the oven that I have hot already. Here we go. I'm getting them. Oh, they look perfect. Now make sure you have your hot pads. You need a hot pad on the table so you don't burn your table. But look how good they look. Nice and crispy. And from there, it's the fun part comes now. But that didn't take long, about 25, 30 minutes. So, and be careful that I don't burn myself. I'm gonna put the rest of my tater tots over here. Now, you have to have a plate to serve them on, just like we did last week. We're going to scoop us off some tachos. Put them on our plate, just like this, just like you would nacho chips. Alrighty. There we go. So I have my little pile of nachos. Oh, I did it. Tachos. So my first topping takes a little preparation, and you can do this while your tater tots are baking. I took 1 can of vegetarian burger. This is what I had at home. Use what you have at home. And I fried that up in a little oil. in a frying pan. You may need help with this depending on how old you are, but I put in a little bit of onion because I love onion in it. So after it got a little bit brown, I added 1 pack of taco seasoning. And hopefully you have something like this, or enchilada seasoning, or fajita seasoning, those kind of things that you sprinkle over your vegetables and your veggie meat. Then I added 1/2 cup of water. And I mixed it all together, and I let it just sit there during those 25 minutes while my tots were baking. And you stir it every now and then, but you want it to absorb some of the moisture and some of that seasoning to go in your meat so it tastes good. So this is what your meat will look like when you're finished. All right, it's just like taco meat. And the fun part about it is that you won't probably use it all, and you might have some left for tomorrow or the next day. Put it in the refrigerator, make tacos, enchiladas, burritos, whatever you like. For my first topping now, this is kind of like a haystack, but it's done on tater tots. So I'm going to put some of this vegetarian meat on my tachos. I like to put them on first. Can you hear my cat crying in the background? Yeah, there he goes. He hears food, smells food, hears me in the kitchen, so down he comes. All right, so I'm just putting my meat around. And by putting the hot meat on the hot tachos, it's gonna be good for my next topping. George, stop. George is deaf and he cannot hear how loud he's crying. So I don't want to be mean to him, but he'll just come over here and lay down by me. All right, there we go, our first topping. And what I like to do next is put my cheese on, because then my cheese will melt on my hot tachos. You know, if you wanted to, and you were serving a lot of people, you could just put all this meat, or as much as it would take to cover all these tachos, and put your cheese on top of it, still in the pan, and then you could put it in the oven, and it just melted a little bit, just takes 2 or 3 minutes. All right, so there's my, it's starting to look like a nacho, isn't it? There's my tacho. From there, I'm going on to, let's see, I think the next thing on nachos is usually lettuce. So these toppings, we did just like last week. We prepared them in advance so that we'd have everything done when we come to have our lunch. It would be nice and easy, or our snack, however you want to eat this. Now, this is a little, it needs some color, don't you think? It's kind of dull, but that lettuce isn't very, and some lettuces are more green than that, which I would use, but this is all I have at home right now. All right, so I'm gonna take, what's this thing? You know what this is, right? A green pepper. You can use green, red, yellow, whatever you have, orange. I'm gonna put a little pepper on top of my tacho. Ooh, that looks good. If you don't like it, don't use it. From there, I need a little more color. So here I am back with my sweetie tomatoes that I love, but this time I chopped them up a little bit. Remember last week we put them on the skewer just whole, but oh, now it's starting to look pretty, isn't it? See, you can see that bright tomato. Oh, that makes it look so nice. Whoopsie, there we go. All right, there's my tacho. I'm getting close to done. Another thing a lot of people like to add are olives, but I didn't open the can and slice it because I'm not going to eat these olives. I keep them for when the kids come over. They love olives. That's always good on a tacho. And then my last topping, oh, you're gonna love these, green onions. Ooh, you know I love onions, but these are a different kind. There's lots of different kinds of onions, and these are always used to give a little more color. They look so pretty on the top. If you watch a cooking show, you'll see they use them all the time. Now there's my tacho. If you had some avocado, which I don't have any of that right now either. I don't get to the grocery store very often, but that would be good and be pretty on it, even if you made it into guacamole. So when we eat it, we always like to put a little salsa on it. Gives it a little bit more of that Mexican food flavor. Some of us are really missing going to our Mexican restaurants. So this will help your taste buds that have been craving Mexican food. Boy, that looks good. Now, the last thing you can put on if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Remember this, make it the way you like it. It's a little bit of creamy. Creamy is always good on it. This is a good Mexican, kind of like a Mexican sour cream. You can use sour cream, you can use vegan sour cream, you can use whatever you like or whatever you have at home. I'm just using plain old simple ranch because that's what our family likes. Let's see, that's not a full container either because we're running low. There we go. And just a few little drizzles and dots. Oh, that's so pretty. It's going to be delicious too. And it's a fun thing to do together as a family. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll make it soon and let us know if you like it or not. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again.
좋으신 하나님, 좋으신 하나님, 참 주신 나의 하나님. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me.
This week, we are starting a special feature. In each episode, Grandma Cece will be telling stories about our very own Adventist pioneers. These are the amazing people who started the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So sit back and enjoy these interesting accounts from our history.
Lost in a storm at sea. Ellen Harmon and her sister Sarah were visiting in the home of Joseph Bates in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. Ellen was sharing the wonderful things that the Lord had shown her with all the believers that had gathered there. Someone told Ellen about a family who lived on a nearby island that were very discouraged. They felt that God had forgotten all about them. "I must go and visit these dear people," Ellen said. "But how can I get to West Island?" "I'm sure Mr. Gurney, our Adventist blacksmith, will take you if you ask him," said one of the ladies. The next morning, Ellen asked Mr. Gurney if he could take Sarah and her to the island to visit this family. "I'll be happy to do what I can," Mr. Gurney promised. "I have a friend who lets me borrow his sailboat from time to time, and I can check with him and see if his boat might be available for me to use. When would you like to go, Ellen?" "As soon as possible," Ellen said. "Could we go this afternoon?" Mr. Gurney told her that he would check with his friend, and if it was available, he'd come over to the house where she was staying to let her know, and then take them over to the boat dock. Mr. Gurney's friend said it would be fine with him if he borrowed the sailboat. So that afternoon, Mr. Gurney headed over to the place where Ellen and her sister were staying. When he arrived at the house, Sarah answered the door and told Mr. Gurney that Sarah had become very sick. "Do you still want to go to West Island?" asked Mr. Gurney. "Oh, yes," said Ellen. She tried to get up, but she fell back on the bed. "Would you go if you were well enough?" said Mr. Gurney. "Yes, yes," Ellen answered. "That discouraged family must hear quickly the good news God has sent us." Mr. Gurney knelt beside Ellen's bed, and he asked God to heal her so that she could take his love to the people who felt so lonely and forgotten. As soon as Mr. Gurney had finished his prayer, Ellen sat up. Then she stood up. God had taken away all her pain and sickness. "Let's head for that boat dock," Ellen said, and she motioned for Sarah and the other lady that was going with them to follow Mr. Gurney to the sailboat. By the time they were all in the boat, it was late afternoon. As soon as they had gone out into the ocean, past the point, suddenly the wind began to blow. Strongly at first, then fiercely. The lightning flashed and the thunder clashed, then heavy rains beat down upon them. The little boat rocked back and forth. The blackness of night came and the storm continued to toss them this way and that. Mr. Gurney didn't know where they were. No matter how hard Mr. Gurney tried to steer the boat, he couldn't control it. They were lost in the ocean and were expecting the boat to sink at any moment. Holding tightly to the boat, Ellen knelt down and asked God to save them from drowning. And right there, God gave her a vision. While the winds were blowing and the lightning flashing and the thunder crashing, the waves washing over the sides of the boat, drenching Ellen and the others, in the beauty and quietness of the vision, Ellen knew God was with them. He told her that they were safe. He said that before he would let her drown, he would dry up every drop of water in the entire ocean. He told Ellen that her work for him was just beginning, and then the vision ended. Once again, Ellen felt the boat plunge the waves, but now she wasn't afraid. She felt great peace and joy, for they were in God's hands. Quickly, she told the others what God had shown her. Immediately, their fears vanished also, because they knew that Jesus was right there with them in that terrible storm. The boat was tossing so badly that Mr. Gurney decided to throw the anchor overboard. So over it went with a huge splash. Down, down it went the anchor. After what seemed like a long time, the anchor finally caught on a rock or something on the bottom of the sea. The water is shallower here. We must be near land, Mr. Gurney said. Cupping his hands to his mouth, he called loudly, "Help! Help!" Over and over he called out. There were only 2 houses on the island. In the home closest to the shore, everyone was asleep. Everyone but a little girl. She was lying in bed, listening to the wind wailing around the house when she heard a faint, "Help! Help!" She listened carefully, and again she heard, "Help!" She jumped out of bed and ran to her father's bed. "Father, Father, I heard something. I think I heard somebody cry for help." Father sat up in bed and listened. He heard it too. Somebody's in trouble. He jumped out of bed and quickly dressed for the storm and ran down the path. What will he do? Will he be able to find them? We'll find out next week.
Hi everyone, it's Nature Story time, and I brought a friend here with me today. Do you think you can find him? He's somewhere in the trees back here. Oh, there he is. Well, we're going to be talking about birds today. Do you guys know what this bird is called? This is a toucan. You see how pretty his coloring is? Look how beautiful God painted this bird. Well, we're going to be talking about a few different kinds of birds today. Did you know that different kinds of birds eat different kinds of food? Some birds eat fruit. Some birds eat seed like this. Some people like to put bird seed like this out in feeders in their yard to attract birds to come into their yard. But not all birds eat that kind of food. Some other birds eat insects or even fish. Some birds will eat many kinds of food, while others are quite particular about what they eat. The Toco toucan, like this guy here, he lives in South America, and it has a huge, brightly colored bill. It eats mostly fruit such as wild figs, and sometimes it will eat other things like insects or lizards. Wow. But you will never see a toucan catching a fish in a river. It just doesn't do that. But on the other hand, this bird right here in the top picture, this is the pied kingfisher. And he does eat fish, and sometimes it also eats other small animals it finds in the water. It lives in Africa and Asia, and it finds its food by hovering above the water and watching for a fish to eat. When it finds one, it quickly dives down and catches it. So this bird has to be pretty speedy and quick to get its meal, doesn't it? There's another little bird called the little bee-eater, and this one lives in Africa, and it doesn't eat food like either of the other 2 birds we've just learned about. Just like its name says, it eats insects, especially bees, wasps, and hornets. Wow! It especially likes to catch these insects while they're flying. Bee eaters usually won't catch a bee that has landed on a plant or on the ground. And there's the little bee eater. Isn't he pretty? God has made such beautiful birds. Well, these birds have a specific diet. There are certain kinds of food that they can eat, as well as food that they will never eat. Toucans and bee eaters won't ever try to catch a fish, and kingfishers will never eat bees or fruit. Well, what about us? Do we have a specific diet that we need to follow?
Yes, we do. The Bible tells us so, doesn't it? The best food for us is fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. That's why Daniel refused to eat the king's food when he arrived in Babylon. It wasn't simple, healthful food. It was very rich and not healthy, and he knew it wouldn't give him a healthy mind and body. God wants all of us to have healthy minds and bodies, and that's why he has told us what kind of food is best for us to eat. And God said in the Bible, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food." Genesis 1:29. So God has given us everything that we would ever need to be healthy and strong. So why don't we decide today to eat those foods that are healthy for us? The fruits, the vegetables, the grains, and the nuts, so we can have healthy minds and bodies for Jesus. Okay, kids, well, I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Happy Sabbath.
Our lesson this week is about Daniel, so let's sing Dare to be a Daniel.
Standing by a purpose true, heeding God's command. Honor them, the faithful few, all hail to Daniel's band. Dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. Dare to have a purpose firm, dare to make it known. Hold the gospel banner high, on to victory grand. Satan and his testify, all shout for Daniel's band. Dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. Dare to have a purpose firm, and dare to make it known.
How much do you know about the book of Daniel? Daniel was taken captive to Babylon at the age of 16 and handpicked to be a wise man of the king. He was born into a noble Judean family. In him there was no blemish. He was good-looking, gifted in wisdom, and quick to understand. He was given 3 years of training in the best of Babylon schools. His life was one of courage, faith, and prayer. Daniel wrote his book about his life filled with trials and visions. Do you know how many chapters are in his book? That's right, there are 12. Let's see if you know what each chapter is about. Can you unscramble these topics and put them with the correct chapter? Let's see how well you did. Chapter 1, 10-Day Test. Chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's Dream of Statue. Chapter 3, Fiery Furnace. Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar Lives Like an Animal. Chapter 5, Writing on the Wall. Chapter 6, Lion's Den. Chapter 7, Vision of 4 Beasts. Chapter 8, Vision of Ram and Goat. Chapter 9, Daniel's Prayer. Chapter 10, Vision of the Glorious Man. Chapter 11, Kings of North and South. And Chapter 12, Prophecy of End Time. Try to remember these chapters because we're going to ask you again next week.
Hello and welcome to Friends Praise. Today we have a very special production for you. We're traveling back in time to beautiful Babylon. There we have stationed one of our best storytellers. She's going to tell you the story of a very important Bible character. Let's go to her now.
Have you ever been tempted to do something wrong when you knew the right thing to do? How about when you wake up in the morning and you know you should have worship, but you just want to play one game on your tablet? How about when you go to church? You know you should be listening to the sermon, but you'd rather just talk to a friend or read a book? What about if you've got chores to do, but everybody else is playing outside? I just want to go outside like everybody else. You know, Satan knows just how to tempt us to make us do wrong things. But it's important that we stand up for the right thing, just like the man in our lesson today. These next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about a man who decided to stand up and do the right thing, even if it was difficult. he decided to be faithful to God. And he was faithful to God, and God was faithful to him. He even wrote a book about his experiences. You may have heard of him. His name? Daniel. Daniel grew up in the country of Judah. He had godly parents who loved him very much. They taught him to be faithful to God. They taught him to be healthy and strong. They gave him good, healthy foods to eat. Fruits and vegetables and brown bread, things that would make his mind smart and his body strong. Well, if you remember in our lesson last week, we studied the prophets. And the prophets had said, if you don't turn from your evil ways, God is going to allow you to be taken captive for 70 years. Well, unfortunately, even though Daniel was faithful to God, he was still part of this group that was taken captive. King Nebuchadnezzar sent his soldiers to surround the city of Jerusalem. And Daniel and his friends were taken away to the country of Babylon. When they arrived after a long journey to Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar had Ashpenaz, the one who was in charge of all the eunuchs. He had him go and look among all the young men and pick out the ones who looked handsome, the ones who had no deformities or nothing wrong with them, the ones who were wise. He was going to make these his wise men. And they were going to have some special training to do in order to be the king's wise men. Well, Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were all among the young men who were chosen. Well, the men were chosen, and unfortunately, they were given new names. See, the Hebrew names Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those names honored the God of heaven. But now in Babylon, they were given names that honored the gods in Babylon. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Then his 3 friends were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, it sounded like it was going to be good training for these men. They were going to study the Chaldean language and literature. But then they heard that they were going to be given special food from the king's table, the king's delicacies, and they were going to drink the king's wine. Wait a minute. Daniel and his friends knew there was something wrong with that. First of all, the food on the king's table had been offered to idols. Would we eat any food that had been offered to idols? No, that would be like saying, we appreciate the idols for giving us that food. Daniel and his 3 friends knew they could not do that. Well, they were going to drink the king's wine. Daniel knew what the scriptures would say about drinking wine. He knew it wasn't healthy for your body. His parents had told him that. They couldn't do that. So they went to the chief eunuch, the chief of the eunuchs. And they said to him, please don't make us eat the king's delicacies. Let us just eat what we're used to, our healthy vegetables, our foods that will make us strong. Oh, but the chief of the eunuchs said, I cannot allow you to do that. I'm so sorry. But even if you like those foods, if the king heard about it and you guys looked weak and puny compared to all those stronger men who ate the king's food, well, they'd have my head. Daniel said, can we just try it for a few days? How about 10 days? For 10 days, you let us eat vegetables and pulse and the things that are good for our mind and make our bodies strong. Well, he thought about it and he said, okay, 10 days. We'll try it for 10 days. Well, don't you know, at the end of the 10 days, all the men were brought in. And those who ate from the king's table, sometimes when you eat a lot of food and it's really rich, you just don't feel so good. You don't look so good. And that's how they looked. But Daniel and his 3 friends, they'd been eating God's diet. They'd been eating foods that were healthy for their body and for their brain. And they stood out among the other men as looking healthier and stronger. So they were allowed to keep their diet for these 3 years that they were going to be in training. So every day they studied and they became wiser in the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. And at the end of the 3 years, they were taken to the king himself. All of these men were taken to the king, and the king questioned them. And after questioning them, he looked at Daniel and his 3 friends. And do you know that he found they were 10 times wiser than all the other men? That's right. They were faithful to God, and God was faithful to them. They did their part in doing what they knew to be right, even when it was difficult, even when everybody else was eating from the king's table. Do you know, if we choose to be faithful to God, God will fulfill his promises and be faithful and take care of us. He even made Daniel an ambassador, a representative in the kingdom of Babylon. I can't wait to hear some more about Daniel's story next week.
Well, that was a great story. I love how God works things out for the people that love him. How well were you listening at home? Let's find out. It's time for quiz time. I always come prepared. Ta-da! All right, question number 1. Where was Daniel taken as a captive? A, Persia, B, Babylon, C, Libya, or D, Ethiopia? The answer was B, Babylon. Question number 2. What was Daniel's new name? A, Belteshazzar, B, Hananiah, C, Moses, or D, Ashpenaz? The answer was A, Belteshazzar. Question number 3. What kind of food helps your body be strong and your mind be clear? A, unclean meats, B, desserts, C, vegetables, or D, chocolate? The answer was C, vegetables. Question 4. How many days long was Daniel's food test? A, 5 days, B, 7 days, C, 10 days, or D, 100 days? The answer was C, 10 days. Question number 5. How many years did Daniel and his 3 friends study the language of the Chaldeans? A, 3 years, B, 1 year, C, 2 years, or D, 10 years? The answer was A, 3 years. Question number 6. Who was the king of Babylon? A, Joseph, B, Daniel, C, Saul, or D, Nebuchadnezzar? The answer is D, Nebuchadnezzar. Question number 7. How did Daniel and his friends compare with the other men after 3 years? A, there was no difference. B, they were 5 times wiser. C, they were not as smart as the other wise men. Or D, they were 10 times wiser. The answer was D, they were 10 times wiser. Thanks for joining in for us with Friends in Praise.
Our memory verse song this morning comes from 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30. We're going to teach you a new song. You can listen the first time we sing it, and then we'll sing it again, and we'd love for you to join in with us.